Hey everybody, this is Alex Krupski along with Jake Hoffman for episode number 9, almost in double digits of the Millennials in Print podcast. Today we are very happy to have Wendy Hunjadi on the podcast with us today, and again, hope I'm pronouncing that right.
You are.
Great, luckily for me. And she is our Director of Client Experience here at Arandell Corporation, and we plan on touching on a lot of stuff today, kind of how the client workflow has been like your entire career, and just kind of hear more about your background. We are just excited to have you on.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you kind of wanted to start with how you got into the print industry, I think Arandell Bindery.
Yes. Well, so it started out with sibling rivalry.
Okay. There you go.
I actually would have probably gone into computer science at Whitewater, but my sister, who's a year and a half older, she was, I'm the little sister in the footsteps doing everything she was doing. She went to Whitewater for computer science, and I'm like, I can't. I just, my whole life.
Gotta do something different.
I have to do something different. So senior year, had some extra electives, stumbled into print, really liked the science and the creative.
Sure.
And the teacher's like, hey, up at Stout, they've got a good program, 4-year degree. And I went ahead and pursued that and fell in love with the industry and have been in it ever since. So started at Arandell Bindery.
Yes.
5 years there in customer service. And what was great about my experience there is started out doing customer service, but then they expanded that role. So I was doing everything from estimating to purchasing to invoicing. It really gave you that cradle to grave understanding of the workflow. And then even got into a little bit of sales.
Oh, okay.
And did some traveling, did some sales opportunities, which was another great experience because they did not have a dedicated sales force at that time. And was able to kind of understand what the sales needs are a little bit, in terms of understanding how that communication needs to happen. So great learning experience, but then opportunity came to join Arandell. Surprisingly, they took me on 8 months pregnant.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
I'm picturing the faces of the client services team when I show up, 8 months pregnant. Here's your new person to join the team.
She'll be gone very shortly.
Did you start as a manager then here?
No, started as a CSR.
Okay.
Okay.
Kind of went back to what I really enjoyed, which was the service side of it. And seeing a project come from inception to execution and following through on all that. Really enjoyed that part of the work. And then just sort of grew with Arandell.
Sure.
So started out in customer service, moved into adding some sales support responsibilities, then into management, and now director of client experience, which has a little bit broader understanding in that it has some software components to it and the architecture of the overall client experience.
So at Arandell, you said it's pronounced?
Mm-hmm.
Arandell, they were a pure finishing company then, just all binding, finishing.
They were a trade bindery and served the Milwaukee area printers. So I had the good fortune of being able to work with companies like HM Graphics, Merrick, Sells at the time, Arandell.
Yep.
So in a way, I've been working with Kathy Schaber my entire print career.
Yeah.
Not just at Arandell, because she was one of the clients that I dealt with when I was
awesome.
with the Arandell account.
Well, I think anybody that has worked at Arandell has had a chance to work with Kathy at some point. She's been here not since the start, not close to the start, but
51.
She's been here a long time.
Wow.
51 years, and what a great person to learn from and have as a mentor in the industry. She's so fabulous and such high energy. So yeah, it's been a huge blessing to be able to work with her all these years.
So one of the things that I know we've kind of had a great relationship with is Stout, right? So getting some. So initially it was a printing program, right? It was a dedicated print program, and then it's kind of evolved over the years, but it still has a print focus or element to it.
Yeah, when I was there. Class of 91. When I was there, it was under the industrial technology umbrella, so it was a concentration.
Okay.
And so it was drawing a lot from the high school graphics classes.
Sure.
But then as, capital budgets changed with high schools, they had to expand a little bit. So it did become its own major. It was a graphic communications major. It still is. But they ended up looking broader than just the manufacturing side, the ink on paper side. They started to look at elements of design. So they started to see some of the graphic design students join the graphic communications program and having great success with that.
Sure.
Also started to look at cross-media graphics. So it was the data side, the marketing campaigns,
Sure.
how you can leverage print as one output, but you also have these other ways of utilizing that same data to get out your message to the media. So I think the pendulum has swung back a little bit more towards the true manufacturing side as well as design. But what a great program. I wish there were more high school graphics programs that were feeding into it like back in the day. It's got such a high placement. You've got employers fighting each other for these students. And they could easily double, triple the number of students in the program and
be fine.
In terms of finding jobs for those students.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting hearing their approach where they're taking all of the elements of marketing essentially from creative to development of other channels and combining it with print. I think that's such a fresh approach that I just don't think you hear about until you get into the print industry itself. From my experience, I feel like I was reading textbooks in college where it said, yeah, print, it's important, but it's kind of dying. And it's just like, it's not true at all, you know?
No, and if COVID has taught us nothing else, it's that people have really stumbled into the power of the print, you know, and you see these normal traditional retail outlets being shut down, or mask mandates made it difficult to be out and about, or people weren't as comfortable being out and about. But with that catalog presence, you still had that touch to the consumer. You still got in their home. They had to touch it to, you know, set it aside. And that interaction just proved to be really positive for the retailers that had that print presence. So I'm sure you've covered this before in other podcasts, but just seeing the brands, these national brands who all of a sudden were kind of thwarted in one outlet, explore the print outlet and that method of getting their message out and how well that worked for them.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think you're uniquely positioned at Arandell to speak to is sort of this evolution of the number of jobs, the number of clients, the number, obviously, you're expanding your team to try to grow with the expanding customer base and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about sort of the trends that you're seeing in that regard?
It's very different portfolio mix, if you will, from what it was years ago. We used to have, think of your shopping mall, you used to have the larger anchor stores, right? You know, the heavy big box retailers. And we still have a presence with a lot of them, but just like your shopping centers, those anchor stores struggled, right? Amazon comes in and other challenges, and they struggled a little bit. In the meantime, these boutique brands really just emerged and started to have great success. So instead of having, you know, a few large jobs where you'd have quantities of 7 million, 10 million, you would have many, many, many smaller jobs with quantities that ranged anywhere from, you know, 300,000 to 1.5 million, and really hit our sweet spot as an organization. But then I felt a responsibility to bring that metric forward. As a company, we tend to look at impressions in units, right? You know, how many cycles in the press room, how many cycles in the bindery. But the steps that are involved with executing a project are the same regardless of whether I type a 2 or if I type a 9. I have all those same steps to manage. So I keep track of that metric, making sure that we're staffed appropriately to be able to handle all the front-end project requirements with our sales support team, working directly with sales and the clients, making sure we have a clear understanding that way, and then the customer service team, making sure that they can execute appropriately and stay on top of all of those details.
And I think one of the things, too, is it used to be, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but it used to be, here's what a year looks like. Now it's kind of like, what can we do in 2 months? Or, wait, we're on press tomorrow. We're thinking about a quantity change kind of thing.
Yeah, we're not quite to the sheet-fed environment yet, but there are certain clients that will all of a sudden be like, you know what, I need more of this particular one. I've got this new launch I want to do, and oh, by the way, we want to be in home in a month. And Doesn't happen that often. Again, the sheet-fed world is a little bit more dynamic that way, but the days of having that really strong predictability isn't there, especially with COVID and especially with all the changes that have been happening. It's put this way, we've become really good at revisions.
Really quickly.
So where a job might have had 3-4 revisions over the course of the planning, now we're seeing that in some cases 10, 12, 13 revisions over the course of the project just before we start putting the ink on paper. So
that's insane. That is absolutely crazy. I love the path they're heading down. If I could circle back on one thing quick when we were talking about UW-Stout, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your role, because I think you're a advisory board member for the cross-media graphics department management. I know it's like 10 words, so I might have screwed that up, but I want to hear more about that role and then the co-op program that we have here too.
Yeah, exactly. So Arandell's had a presence on the advisory board for the print program up at Stout for years. Back when I was a student, Jim Genke was our advisory board member, so it's been a long-standing relationship. And Arandell and Stout's printing program, they have very similar values and what they're looking for in terms of staff and what they bring to the table. So you will see Stout alumni in almost every department. Procurement, you've got them in finance, sales, certainly in client services, scheduling. We have a really strong group of alumni from that program that found success at Arandell, and Arandell succeeds in large part because of that program. I was fortunate enough to be able to join the advisory board, I want to say about 6 years ago now, and leading that graphic communications through some of the decision making they've had to do, as the number of students has changed, and how they can best align their instructional resources, still have the students get the experience they need, and do it in 4 years.
Yeah.
So I am representing more or less the web offset perspective. There are other board members that are in packaging and design, sheet-fed folks from a lot of industry leaders, and it's a great experience to be able to connect with the students, hear their passion for print. I mean, that's the one thing we never quite lose. I as much as I've been in the industry for many years now, when you see that first handbound come off and land on your desk, and you know that you helped bring that to life, you still geek out over the print, right?
Right.
With looking through the award submissions, right? Looking through and seeing the incredible work that our clients create and that we are able to bring to life. You see that with the students. They've got a little bit of ink in their veins. They've got that passion for print, and that's why we love to bring them on to our organization and why they do so well. The co-op experience is a great place to start that relationship. So we offer a June through December co-op every year, and the first two and a half weeks are spent through Life of a Catalog training program, where they get to, from a 10,000-foot level, understand the overall process and then speak to all the resident experts. So if we're covering scheduling, they get to spend time with scheduling. If we're covering estimating, they get to spend time with estimating. And when it's all done and they've had a chance to make all those relationships, then they pretty much plant in customer service, get to support that team through the busy season. And all those Christmas catalogs, it does get a little crazy in the fall. And then as a thank you for helping to support us when we're our busiest, we make sure they get unhooked from their desk and they have a chance to explore the areas that interested them the most. So if their passion isn't client service, but they really love the pre-media area, go spend some more time in pre-media. And we really encourage them to get the most out of the experience so that they can sit across the table from a recruiter down the road and just have a really positive experience to talk about.
And I think, like you touched on, they do end up finding their passion if they want to stick with Arandell. If it is in another department, we have UW-Stout grads from the co-op program in almost every department, Yeah,
it's been a fun experience for us because we get to know them, they get to know us, and oftentimes it does turn into a long-term relationship. I can think of several right off the top of my head that are either in client services or scheduling or other areas where they found it to be a good fit, and especially the people. I mean, they just love the people, and we're very pleased that we've been able to create that experience. And then when they go back to Stout, they have an opportunity to speak to their co-op experience with other classmates. So I kind of count on them for recruiting. And I'll be up there again in the fall. So I'll have to hit up Robbie and make sure that he's promoting the program up there.
The good word.
Exactly.
So then circling back now to the first part of the conversation, which I was really excited to hear more about, was this changing work mix that you're seeing from our clients and different versioning. And so how have you or other, not even just Arandell folks, but how have we had to adjust that workflow with clients because of that?
We don't want to ever lose that ability to spend time with the client. I mean, yes, email's great and so on, but we want those personal conversations. We want that relationship build. We don't want to lose that time that we spend interpreting the client's instructions. We need to be accurate. We need to be responsive. We need to be easy to work with. So those are the core values of our department. What my job then is to make sure that the data entry side, that the getting the instructions processed and ready for manufacturing, for logistics, is easy. So I've done a lot to streamline our software and our workflow to try and make that process more accurate, more efficient. I've sort of know the ways that customer service can, for example, if you type something accurately once, if you have to retype it 2, 3, 4 times, are you going to be accurate every single time?
Right.
So what we did is we created software where data flows from one system to the other, and they're not having to do all that retyping. And so that's been my job, is as the portfolio mix has evolved, to make sure they still are comfortable with their volume, or we write staff accordingly. But then take away the opportunities for the errors to happen, discrepancies to happen, and just bake in that accuracy for them so they can be efficient and responsive to the clients that way.
And that's where that computer science kind of experience came in, was in developing.
Take that, big sister.
Exactly.
It's kind of
following the footsteps a little bit,
It's kind of funny how that all came across, because again, I'm in print. I dedicated to that, and it was back in 2000. Internet's a baby at that point. Yep. Jake was a baby at the point. So
we both were.
I was 7, to be clear.
So back in 2000, there was a company out there that decided the internet would be a great communications tool, and they positioned themselves as saying, hey, print buyer, you send your specifications to us. We'll disseminate that to several different printers. We'll have them come back with proposals and work that through with them as the consolidator of that information. And we were like, wow, we love the idea of using the internet as a communications tool that way, which was relatively new. But we did not like the idea of a third party sitting between us and our clients.
Yeah. Right.
It just didn't make sense. So they came to me and said, hey, would you be willing to help create like a client portal, a website?
Sure.
And so we worked with some developers, and Customer Connect was born. And then we're like, wow, we've got this data. We should probably see what we can do with this. And the developers were actually the ones who said, you guys are silly now to type this into a different system. So that's where the data flow came in, and we built off of there. So we were lucky to be early on that experience, and with great client input, we've been able to refine it and evolve it over the years. And it's been a powerful tool that's a little bit different from what is out there in the industry from other suppliers.
Right. And little did you know what it would turn into 20 years later, 21 years later.
Yes, I still got to dabble with the computer geek in me still gets to dabble and play in that and create, but without having to go to school for that or have any background. Again, my time at Arandell Bindery, when I was in sales, I actually understood a little bit about relational databases, just trying to build something that I could keep track of who the contacts were at different companies and the calls, and it all came together. Yeah,
so it's kind of this combination of, you want to get the right people on the customer service side, but being supported by a system that is going to maintain accuracy, reliability, quick turns, all that kind of stuff.
Right? Yeah, let's equip them with the best tools so they can really focus their energies on the interaction with the client.
Perfect.
That they understand what the client is seeking.
The 12 changes.
It's the 12 changes. Make sure they
Let
can
them
keep up with
focus on
COVID.
that.
You don't want it to be where they're worried about making a typo or that the execution side is too cumbersome.
Gotcha.
So
That makes sense.
that's where I've had the opportunity to streamline that for them.
Yeah. All right, so Wendy, we are two millennials, and we have a hard time imagining anything without the internet, obviously, classic millennials. So could you talk a little bit about how client communications have changed? Because when you started, email hasn't been around that long, but it was almost like in a pre-email era, pre-internet era. How has that changed over the last
It was
2 decades?
strange. I'll never forget. I was working on a project, and they're like, "Oh, if you could just email me that information." I'm like, "What?" So I've really dated myself at this point. But yeah, it's changed. When we used to have to communicate with our external clients, it was a lot of phone work. And, we still enjoy getting to build client relationships that way. They're some of my best friends, and people that you have great relationships with over the years. And then it switched, so everybody's more comfortable with email, and certainly email threads are a great documentation tool and so on. But with the millennials that I have on staff, or even the next generation, is it Gen X?
Gen
Z.
Gen
Z.
Z? Okay.
I believe.
As they're coming on board, it's almost trying to engage them to pick up the phone. So we do some soft skills training in the department. We talk about word choice. We talk about, if you're going back and forth, you can maybe go back and forth 2-3 times, and then you're picking up the phone. If we have news that we're delivering that might require presenting options, that's done by phone.
Sure.
Those sorts of soft skills, translate, but it's amazing how each generation has its own preferences.
Right.
And the nice thing about our client services area is we draw from all demographics, so they're learning from each other. And that's my biggest advice to the new hires. It's great to listen to music, right? But take it out occasionally, because you don't realize how much you learn by osmosis. The person next to you has a challenging situation, either with an internal client or an external client, and you're hearing how they navigate it even without realizing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you start
That's a
to
really
pick
good
up
point.
some strategies.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation is, if you need to concentrate, absolutely put the headphones in and dig into what you've got going on. But if you're just sort of casually keeping up with your work, take the headphones off and kind of experience what's happening in the department, because we learn from each other so well in that environment.
Eavesdrop.
Basically.
Do some eavesdropping.
Learn
right?
by osmosis.
Yeah.
Pick your head up.
Osmosis is such a great way to put it. I'm going to make sure I keep that in the tool belt for the future instead of eavesdrop.
That was terrible.
But it is funny how certain words will all of a sudden just filter through, and you pick up phrases and styles that you maybe wouldn't have had normally, and wow, that was a really great way to communicate that challenge. Internal clients has changed even more. You used to walk around with memos to try and officially communicate things, or production tickets were photocopies, and you would spend half your day, photocopying and walking things around. And we are electronic out to the plant. We're an internet-based tool system, so we push out what's called red alerts for last-minute changes, and it's a really efficient way to communicate throughout the organization. But it's interesting. You do want to be out on the floor. You do want to build those relationships, because in any relationship, when the challenges come, it's so much easier to navigate if you've had a little FaceTime or some phone time, relationship time.
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the things is now this whole remote, not remote workforce. How does that impact?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And it's interesting because it's similar to me when it becomes email and even phone calls, because at times it's email is great because it's there. You can reference it. You can go back, but also it's super nice sometimes to just get on a phone and say, here are the 18 things we need to talk about.
Right.
As opposed to sending 18 different emails and you're mixing email threads and you're okay, this is just too much. I'm just going to pick up the phone and call. I think at times it's similar, just even getting in a meeting room and you're okay, we've got all the parties here. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Everyone can talk. What are you dealing with? And then, okay, next thing, right?
It becomes a really efficient way to do some collaboration and problem solving. And you can only do so much collaboration via email. And then you have to pick up the phone. You have to have that engagement with a group that way. Makes a huge difference.
Well, you manage a pretty robust team, I would say. Probably one of the bigger teams inside of Arandell. So you kind of touched on it a little bit. You know, we talk about how COVID changed things last year in the podcast before. I'm curious what you had to adjust at being a manager of a pretty big team, how you had to adjust to that and what you did differently knowing the remote work came into play.
It was a really rapid proof of concept.
It sure was. Yeah, good point.
Because, again, the tools that we use are all internet-based. So in theory, we knew this could happen at a point where we had a second facility.
Was a possibility.
Right.
I think we had been talking about it a little bit internally and getting there, and then it was like, we have to now.
Right. Our team was great. The sales support folks are very heavily computer-based. They were able to be 100% remote if they chose to, and if they wanted to come back, that was fine. You know, whatever really worked for them was fine with us. And you know, it was something different for me as a manager. Would I have struggles with that? They were so incredibly responsive. It didn't matter if it was 4 p.m. on a Friday. If I was sending them an email with an inquiry, I got a response within 2 minutes. I mean, they were just really, really responsive, and I think appreciated the opportunity to work from home.
Yeah.
In our customer service area, during the height of the pandemic, we were kind of rotating in teams. So one person would be the hands and feet for the other, so that as proofs came in and materials came in that needed to be logged in for the job, that they could do that. The next week, the other person would be in doing the same. So they worked as teams, and again, such great teamwork in the department. They're awesome people and really looked out for each other. So it went really, really well. And if I have customer service right now, I've got a gal who's like, you know what, with my commute, I would prefer to work a 1 day home a week. That's fine.
No problem.
Yeah.
You know, so I actually have customer service in Kentucky, and we make that work. So it's been interesting. If you have good people, you find a way to make it work, and as long as the tools support the system, you'd never know. You'd never know that they weren't down the hall.
Yeah.
Right.
So Alex had kind of alluded to it, but you have what I would call maybe the most diverse team as well, just in terms of ages, experience, different career paths, things like that. Has there been any sort of challenges bringing all of those different personalities, ages together? Or is it just sort of like, hey, there's young people bringing ideas, and then there's some more seasoned people saying, hey, here's why we do things the way we do? Or how has that kind of worked?
It's worked really well. I like getting ideas from a variety of sources.
Sure.
So you have sort of that Stout education coming forward. You have that industry education, veterans, those who are younger and super comfortable with technology and maybe can find some ways to streamline that we hadn't considered. What we have across the board is mutual respect. Mm-hmm. And I don't have anybody in the department looking down on somebody else for their different background.
Sure.
And if they did, we would encourage discussion around that.
You put it so politically, it's amazing.
There would be osmosis. To forget that idea.
And you know, I try to find people that I think our clients would enjoy working with. You know,
Sure.
Again, that they've got that attention to detail, but they're also easy to work with and enjoyable to work with. And we've been able to assemble that team. There isn't a single one that I wouldn't invite over to my house on a Friday, if socially, because I just enjoy them as human beings.
Yeah.
But darn, they're so accurate and so good. It's just we're really, really fortunate that way.
Awesome.
Another question that I have, especially considering the times we're in as an industry right now with postage costs and paper and things like that, how do you deal with those tough communications or those not so easy to deal with types of communications between yourself and customers and then your team to customers and our sales team and just getting all parties involved?
Yeah, the industry, I mean, like we were saying before, the amount of change over the years has just been incredible. The progression through the industry over this last couple decades. And then we have these things that we can't control, postage being one of them, the paper market challenges being another. What we really try and do is be that resource for the sales team as well as our clients externally, educating them. And so Arandell's wonderful in that they have some dedicated resources, Susan Pinter on the logistics side and Rick Kropsky and others that bring that information to us, allow us to kind of understand how it resonates with our clients, how to get that message out to them, to equip them. Right, that's the whole thing. Is we want to equip them so that they're positioned well to make the appropriate decisions for their company. And even as we face some of these challenges where with paper delays and constraints and allocations, all these crazy things that all brand new this year that I haven't had to deal with before, we're again coming to them with options. You know, heads up, this is what we're seeing. Heads up, this is what we're hearing in the marketplace. And, you know, let's talk about options for your project and how we can make that work for you in spite of the challenges. So we really just focus on, again, equipping and providing our clients with the tools they need to be able to navigate the challenges.
Transparency.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah.
Collaboration.
Right.
Was the word that I yeah,
yeah, exactly.
All the buzzwords.
yeah. Synergy.
Synergy's
The best of all.
Well, and when it comes down to it is our role, I mean, we're not sales, right? We're not out prospecting and things like that, but we do see ourselves as anchoring the relationships.
Sure.
And we want to try and provide that stability and just that, you know, responsive person you can count on as these challenges are swirling around everybody.
Yeah.
Is that they know that they can call Alex and get a quick and accurate response that gives you the information you need. Okay, now I need to understand this. And we're figuring it out together, right? It's it's crazy. I've never seen anything like it, but we're figuring it out together.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, too, is they're experiencing similar challenges in their own business. Right. So there's some level of empathy and understanding as to, it's not just the print industry that's going through some crazy times. It seems just about everyone in every industry is kind of faced with some unique challenges this year.
Right.
Coming out of COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what our clients have been going through in terms of managing their supply chain, trying to predict consumer response, adapting to the changes that they're seeing in consumer response. I mean, I'm sure we'll find that new normal.
Sure.
I don't think we'll find it in 2021.
Or 2022.
Maybe not.
But we will find that new normal, and we'll start to have a level of predictability again in the industry, but not right now. Someday.
Till then, we're all in this together.
That's right.
Right? Positive note.
That's right.
Well, Wendy, I mean, I think in just being conscious of your time and conscious of our audience's time, I think we covered really everything. Did you have any final thoughts before we end the episode?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to highlight a team that works pretty hard. And I so appreciate their efforts. I think they do a nice job for Arandell, and I appreciate the opportunity to highlight their efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you for
Great.
joining us and
you.
talking about everything.
It's been great.
We covered a lot. So
Thanks
again, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thanks again to you guys for joining, and we'll see you in episode 10 for double digits.
Double digits.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.